No price talk and no Lambos. This is not another crypto podcast. Welcome to Ignition. I'm your host, Jillian, and each week we will be looking at the problems solved by blockchain. I'll be going deep with the people building the apps and communities which are changing the world around us. Well, welcome everybody to EOS Dublin's Ignition podcast. Today with me is Domenic Thomas, who is the CEO of Worbli. Worbli, am I saying that right? We're saying it's a great name, Worbli. Very memorable. Worbli, but kind of hard to say sometimes, isn't it? Worbli. Have I said it enough times? Do you think our listeners will remember the name now?
I hope so.
So Domenic, tell me, what is Worbli?
So Worbli is a financially compliant blockchain network built on the EOS.io open source software. And so we are a sister chain of mainnet. So EOS is its own network and the network that is recognized by the block producers and the community holding the EOS token, launched in June. And that is the currently existing live EOS network. And we will be launching our financially compliant version, which is a separate blockchain with its own accounts and its own token, on November 1st. But the big differentiator is we have baked in global financial compliance through the user account level, the network level, the block producers, completely through and through the network.
And you're going for mass adoption, as you're looking at people using blockchain. But in particular, you're looking at the financial industry. And we were talking earlier, and you were saying about how people don't like banks very much these days, do they?
No, I don't think. We were discussing that. No one gets excited, as far as I know, about their bank account or their relationship, I'll say, with the business, right? Like, people love certain businesses. They have a great relationship with them because they feel like this business provides a lot of value. They feel, we'll say, well taken care of, well serviced. But banks really feel like this kind of necessary evil, right? This thing we have to deal with to go about the world, to run a business, to buy things, to receive payment. But if you think about it, in a technical society, technologically advanced society as we are, most of the functions of a bank are fairly simple and should be cheap and should be accessible. And blockchain really takes that to the next level as far as its ability to do that. And so we believe that we can make financial services kind of fun again, something that you feel good about, checking out your accounts, the services and features you feel like are actually helping you grow your financial resources, as opposed to just taxing you and extracting fees at every turn and being so hard and rigid, not seeing you as a person, just seeing you as a credit score or whatever the criteria is. So it's kind of why the name Worbli, a little bit fun, easy to kind of remember, unique. But really, we're hoping that we're going to make financial services something that serves people rather than kind of extracts from them.
I think that's a really important point, because I don't know about other people, but certainly here in Ireland, the banks have moved to everything's automated. But they have it the wrong way. They've taken away that interaction. So you don't know your local bank manager anymore. There's no relationship. Everything goes to head office. So yes, on one hand, you can automate a lot of your banking facilities, but it's not easier, it's not nicer, and certainly not cheaper. So you're going to shake up the world, the financial world, by bringing people onto your Worbli platform to do financial services. So what type of things will people do on Worbli? Will they apply for loans? Will they open accounts?
Yes, we expect in time that businesses will launch sort of the whole suite of various financial services and financial tools. So we're talking with businesses that are prepared to launch insurance applications, investment banks, FX trading platforms, digital asset trading platforms, of course, general banking services, deposits, debit cards. what we call in the industry crypto to fiat gateways, right? So the ability to move from USD or euros, for example, to Bitcoin or Worbli tokens for that matter, and back again in a sort of seamless manner, right? The same way that you do now with banking. For example, I've been traveling a lot for the project, and when I go to Europe, I can still use my debit card or my credit cards, and they make the appropriate conversion for the merchant. My deposits are in USD. They transfer to euros. They charge me whatever they charge me. And it's pretty seamless for me as a user, right? I don't have to prepare too much. I don't have to get a big wad of euros.
Or traveler's checks. Do you remember those?
Right. Well, oh, God. Yeah, I do. Traveler's checks. God, that feels like so antiquated at this point.
It is actually antiquated. I think you're being polite saying you remember them, because I'm sure you're not old enough to actually have used them or to.
I did. I'm actually in my mid-40s. So.
Oh, no way. Oh, no way. You have a very young voice. Wow. So it's any kind of transaction that can be used on your platform then on a Worbli. So I saw a list of industries, and it's more a question of what ones aren't there than what ones are there. Every single industry that involves a transaction. Is that where you're going to add value?
Yes, I really think that, we found that one of the best use cases of blockchain is that we can securely move value across borders between individuals in a trustless environment, and it's cheap, really, for the most part. I mean, we have our hiccups occasionally as some of these networks are kind of going through their growing pains, but I recall a few months back, someone moved something like 10 million USD equivalent of Litecoin in less than 10 minutes for something like $2.
Yes, and the equivalent
and that's unheard of.
Transfer would have been hugely more expensive and hugely more delayed.
Oh, it would have taken, I think they suggested it would be somewhere around 2 to 3 weeks. And the cost would have been somewhere around 2% of the transaction. So 10 million, I think we're talking, $20,000 at least in fees, right? If my math is right there.
It actually I heard about that too as well. The direct comparison was frightening. So how are you raising money to build your project? How are you doing that?
Right. So because compliance is really just the anchor to everything we're doing, we've had to think about this from literally day one and have done so. And have spent a substantial amount of time and money talking to the right people, global attorneys, global accounting firms, other people who have done it, regulators. And so we're doing and have done entirely private fundraising. That is the sort of compliant way to do it. Accredited investors, people we know directly. And so to this point, we've just done seed fundraising, which was enough to get us to the November 1st launch. And now we're opening an additional round of, again, private fundraising. Now, after the network launches and goes live on November 1st, either at launch or shortly thereafter, not quite sure yet on the technical roadmap, we'll have the ability for users to then buy Worbli tokens directly, because once we're launched, there is a clear use case for the token, meaning you need to buy tokens to launch dApps, for example.
Yes.
You have to stake them on the EOS chain. And so EOS probably brings the first, in my opinion, truly real utility token, because the token represents network resources. It's very straightforward.
And you're also going to do a share drop, a very large one. A share drop obviously is much bigger than an airdrop. Like 40% of the tokens, is that correct?
Yes. So 40% of the token supply on EOS mainnet holders. And the reason why we're calling it a share drop is that, an airdrop is when you can directly deposit the tokens into user wallets, right? So if we were launching an application on EOS mainnet, we could airdrop those tokens right into the user's wallets with a smart contract. And there'd be nothing they would need to do. Now, because we are an independent blockchain of mainnet with our own block producers, set of block producers and all of those things, that's not possible. So we need the user to come over and open an account. And then when they do so through a smart contract, the allotment of tokens will be claimed. And then we do have a series of user actions to unlock all of the tokens. A few things we'd like the users to do before all the tokens are unlocked.
Okay. What do you think? You're very keen to push mass adoption, right? Especially transactions and all that, the underlying finances, fintech and blockchain meets what you say. How will you do that? How will you encourage people to get onto your ecosystem?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's about making it easy, right? A just very simple user experience. People are used to interacting with the web as it stands now, whether it's the social media and email. And so for the most part, that's a single sign-on experience, right? I know that my internet experience tends to start with, because I use the Google product suite for email, and we use it for our company. I sign into my email, and then what comes up in Google, right? It's that their search, which is their main product, but then I have the icons to access any applications that I have an account with. Of course, I can access my email, my drive, right? All the features of that Google account are right there.
Yes.
It has to be a single sign-on. So we're working on the ShareDrop portal is the beginning of the Worbli user account. It will be built out. Features will be added. It'll be iterated in time. But we want a single sign-on for users. So they're going to be able to just create an account. They're going to be able to sign in with a password, and there will be their wallet for Worbli. There will be applications in their dashboard that they have accounts with, right, that they've signed up for. There'll be kind of an app store for the network, right? So apps you're looking for. Let me browse. Let me see what's launched recently.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, right. We want to put everything front and center to the user and have this sort of single account sign-on experience. I think the other thing that's critical to adoption for mainstream users is going to be protection. The freedoms of blockchain are wonderful. And I think for we'll say the blockchain technical user, or those of us who are in this kind of innovator stage of blockchain, we understand private keys and public keys and hardware wallets and all these ways in which we can have complete control of our money and complete access to our blockchain assets. But there's risk with that. Because of that freedom, we also have all the liability and accountability. If I lose those private keys, I've seen estimates, but we all know that a lot of Bitcoins are lost. Yes. I can say, for example, in my early mining days in 2010, I used a very small machine that I owned a business at work where I was doing some mining and testing things. And I had sort of a single graphics card. And I probably mined about 40 Bitcoins, and they're lost.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Right? That's $240,000 today, right? But at that time, they were $2 a piece.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, I didn't feel like dealing with the hard drive and and then I had built, very advanced mining rigs at my house. And that's where I mined most of the Bitcoins back then. So, but so many people have that, and for far more. I mean, some of the people who did the early CPU days, they mined thousands and just chucked them because they were worth nothing.
Yes, yeah.
Crazy. So most of Bitcoin, when they talk about the supply of being 21 million, I think accurately, we'll be lucky if there's ever 14 million in true circulation.
Oh, that's interesting. It's a point well made, actually, isn't it? Because you do hear so many horror stories of laptops being chucked out or lost, or keys lost, and it's like So tell me now, you're on the EOS podcast. So how did you and EOS meet, and what did you like about it?
So back in January, when we were starting the project, we realized we wanted to kind of bring this, bridge this gap in financial services, make it easy for users, make it safe. And we looked at blockchains that would fit the criteria primarily for banking, right? So the Visa network, for example, I believe does somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 transactions per second. EOS easily meets that as it stands, and most likely will exceed that in the future. And there's not a lot of blockchains that can make that claim. The other major feature, and really ties back to our earlier question, is user account recovery. So in EOS, you can designate a real life person, like a trustee, someone you trust, that can help you recover your account manually if you lose your private keys. And so that was critical. There's no way you're going to pass a regulatory environment if you're running a business of some sort that accepts user deposits and kind of acts as a custodian of those deposits. And if the user effectively loses their password, in this case, their private key, and you just say, okay, sorry, all your money's lost. That's not going to work. They're going to have to return the money to the user.
Yeah.
Or, you're going to have to have an insurance policy or something. But again, I don't think you're going to get an insurance underwriter that's going to give you a reasonable premium if a user loses a private key and everything's gone.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
That's going to get expensive fast. So there needs to be account recovery. The other thing was obviously the programmability, right? The fact that you can build very complex applications on EOS. And, Dan Larimer's been around a long time, and he picked the two best programming languages to do it, really, in C++ and WASM, which is WebAssembly, which is becoming the new internet standard. It's very much backed by Google and Microsoft and all the giants. It's a much faster language for web apps, because again, people don't understand that everything's not going to run on the blockchain. We're still going to use the internet. The internet's still an important part of blockchain. It's how everybody stays connected.
Yes.
It was those. Oh, and governance, right? The fact that EOS allows for a governance layer with the Ricardian contracts, you can write in rules. And again, for compliance, we absolutely need to be able to do that.
Yes. And what things, so those are things that really impressed you. Go on, spill the beans. Were the things that you found difficult working with EOS?
Yeah, I think to this stage, we haven't found anything in particular that's very difficult. I would say that as someone who's part of mainnet, we're seeing the struggle of governance in a decentralized world, that it's difficult to kind of get started, because if everybody needs input, you all need to come to consensus on almost how to get started. That can be hard to do. There are some issues surrounding RAM, which is the storage on the blockchain, where you store account data, user account data. So you need RAM to create an account. And that's been difficult. We have a solution for our blockchain that's different from the EOS mainnet that's going to allow for free account creation.
Okay.
But again, that was a lot of thinking to try to get there. I think the other problem that we've run into is there was promise that there'd be something called multi-threading, which means CPUs, processors in computers, the things that process the transactions on a computer, or not the transactions, but the data, they have multiple cores. Like we've all heard that, quad core, octa-core, right? All these marketing terms for Intel and the other people who make these chips. And EOS was originally supposed to be able to access, the block producers run these effectively servers, right? Or almost like small data centers to manage the transactions in the network, to store the information in the applications. These CPUs, we can only use one core right now. And that's limiting the speed of the network. If we could get to multi-threading, which would be using multiple cores, we'd be faster in that sense. So that's a little difficult. And then the final thing would be, because we knew we had to build a separate chain that's built with compliance through and through. And again, you could never do this on a public blockchain, because we would have had to impose all of these rules on everybody on that blockchain. The block producers, the user accounts would have to go through AML KYC. And we just knew that there's no way. And even if we could get everybody on mainnet to agree that that was the way they wanted to go, we'd have to have guarantees it would stay that way and not be changed. Because we're not going to convince a bank, for example, to launch a digital bank on a blockchain where the rules could be changed tomorrow or next week or even next year. Right?
Yes.
They need the enterprise guarantees and commitments that the compliance will be there far into the future. So that was something that we knew we had to have a separate chain. And originally, Block One also said they were going to have what's called IBC, inter-blockchain communication, whereby multiple EOS chains could interact easily. The users could move back and forth, for example, with maybe a single account. Tokens could move back and forth easily. Applications could, for example, a user on mainnet would be able to not have to create an additional account on Worbli in order to interact with applications on Worbli. And that Block One, kind of the company building EOS, backburnered IBC a little bit, and they haven't given us a lot of details. So we've actually taken it upon ourselves to start working with teams to build IBC for EOS and for blockchain in general.
Well, that's interesting. Wow. So you're actually stepping up to the mark, if you like. You're seeing a real business need for that.
Yeah, and this is the spirit of blockchain. And the funny thing is, as we talk to traditional businesses, one of the leaps we have to make for them, right? Because adoption is about consumers, but it's also about businesses, right? It's sort of like when the web went live, businesses didn't know what to do, right? And music streaming was a big deal, and people were just sharing all of this intellectual property, right? And the music industry and the film industry kind of went nuts, because they were sort of caught with their pants down. They didn't know what to do with this because they didn't really understand the tech and how they could leverage it.
Yeah.
Well, we have the same issue now with blockchain. Is how do you help businesses understand the use cases, how they can bring their business to the blockchain? And, it's not easy. So, we had to talk to them about this sort of open source spirit. That's part of it, right? The intellectual property is not as big of a deal. We kind of share everything.
Yeah.
But in that, because we're kind of citizens of the EOS community, we envision ourselves developing features on Worbli that will be great for mainnet. We'll absolutely share that technology.
It's a whole different way of thinking. And I must say, one that I absolutely adore, because it's this collaboration and this, helping each other. I mean, it's I was going to say in the real world, but actually we are in the real world. We're in the new world, but in the old world, everything, you're right, IP, competition, and, there was so less helping each other out. And I mean, and it doesn't hurt. I mean, if you're doing this for yourself anyway, so why not share with the rest of the EOS community? And that brings me to my next question. How important is the EOS community to you?
Oh, extremely important. One of the major reasons why we did the share drop is because we wanted all of the mainnet token holders to benefit from our project, our hopefully our future success, be able to create accounts easily and have the resources to do so, and to potentially launch applications. We've even dropped, Block One's portion. Block One, we're having conversations with them of how to do that at a technical level, but basically, they're going to get 100 million tokens.
Wow, that is nice. And tell me, what is the Worbli Network Fund?
So that is our version of the worker proposal fund, or worker proposal system that is in development for mainnet. I was part of a team with Thomas Cox, who was employed by Block One at the time when we started. Back in March, we started working on this, but the idea behind this for mainnet was that we would take a portion of the inflated tokens and put them into this fund for development of the EOS mainnet. And people could submit proposals, and it could be anything from marketing events, meetups, or an application or a tool that mainnet might benefit from. And so we've just taken that same concept. We think it's fabulous, and we're doing the same thing on Worbli. And what this is going to enable is the community to, again, put forth proposals that they think will benefit the blockchain, the network, and hopefully get some funding to do it.
Wow, I love that. So tell me now, what advice would you give somebody looking, sizing up the EOS network? What advice would you give another project manager, CEO?
If they were, building something, I would say that you really want to think through your fundraising for sure. The fundraising environment right now is quite difficult. And I've heard this from many people. It's very challenging, especially at the early stage. Not only do you need a white paper that's clearly defining, the problem that you're trying to solve and what your solution is, but if you can, I highly recommend that you have some sort of, at minimum, demo of your potential product or service. And ideally, you have an MVP, a minimum viable product, because people are not funding ideas at all for the most part. You're kind of going to need to go to probably friends and family, or hopefully, if you have the resources, your own pocket. The other thing I would suggest is, that you really need to get people engaged early in whatever community you're going to enter. So in this case, in EOS, right? You need to be involved. People want you to be a citizen of the wider community. I think.
And how do you do that? Tell me, is that like attending things or being active online?
I think, everything from, there's various telegrams, for example, seems to be the medium of choice for social interaction. And there's pointed telegram groups, from governance to just a general EOS telegram to block producers, application development. There's technical groups, there's all kinds of groups. Engage in the groups that make sense, where you think you might contribute to the conversation or just want to learn. I mean, it's a fabulous way to learn what's going on. And then, if you can, attend meetups. There's a lot of local meetups in most of the major urban cities at this point. No, certainly some regions there aren't some, but for the most part there are.
And if not, maybe start one. Why not?
Right. Absolutely. Definitely.
That's very good advice. Because I think, although the online is very, very good, obviously, but actually meeting people face to face is a super way to build your network and to learn and to find out new things. So I think you're dead right about that. That's an excellent piece of advice for any up and coming CEO with a good idea. Just get out there.
Yeah. It still matters to actually meet people.
Yeah. I know. In this crazy world.
I'm running a completely remote company, right? We don't have any offices. Everybody gathers through Zoom and through Slack and through the other things that we use. And that's how we communicate. It's a lot of video conferencing. And it's going to be a lot of video and audio conferencing with members of the EOS community. And I've participated in that. But yes, I have met, for example, the block producers supporting Worbli. I've met pretty much every single one of them in person. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 that I haven't. And that's through the EOS London meetups that I've attended. That's through conferences, Consensus, the Tulip Conference. But I will give a word of caution. Don't become a conference hound. I think a lot of blockchain projects are spending a lot of time and money blockchain conferences are springing up like spring flowers.
Yes.
I think they're making more money than anybody else right now.
Possibly, yes. Well, I have to confess now, Domenic, that I do travel the world a bit sharing blockchain conferences. You're taking my work away from me.
Well, again, they absolutely serve a great purpose, but be strategic.
Yes.
Think through what you're going to get out of it, not I just have to be everywhere.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
One, it's exhausting. The travel can get, I traveled for 2 months straight at one point. I can say I was never happier to get home than any other time in my life. But, you just have to be careful. There's so much work to do just to launch your project, especially in the early stages. And there's so much sweat equity that goes into it. The resources are valuable. I don't think you want to be spending too much of them just traveling around, going to every event you can get your hands on.
Yeah, no, I agree. Although there's a very good one in Sri Lanka in 2 weeks' time. I urge everyone to go to that one. No, you're dead right, because it's important to me, but it'd be very, especially as an ICO or a project. Obviously I'm going as a speaker, but if you're going to that, they'll fleece you. You're right. All the conferences will take a lot of money off you, and you can spend your money in better ways than doing every conference. I think that's very good advice, very sound advice.
And I would highly recommend to add to that one last thing.
Sure.
If you are attending a conference, schedule yourself some off-conference meetings ahead of time. Almost every conference has a place where you can, connect to the people who are attending. Set yourself up. If you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to develop, and especially if you're fundraising, don't expect to just wander around the conference and get people to write you checks. It doesn't work that way. Almost all of these conferences have a series of kind of, backdoor meetings that are going on all around the conference. Get yourself into some of those meetings.
Yeah. Very good advice. Wow. Well, listen, I love your projects. I love saying the name Worbli. I feel like I'm warbling. I'm like something. It's a great idea. And do you know what I really like too as well? That you're making, one of the core aspects here, the finance, making banking fun again, and actually a service and not something that's like gouging the ordinary people. So that is very, very powerful. I can't wait until you're actually live and I'm going to be using your service. So again, with me today is Domenic Thomas, who is the CEO of Worbli. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Jillian, for having me. It's been great.
Brilliant.